Welcome. This is Better Decisions for Life, the channel that gets you thinking and sometimes gets you vlogged. So I just would like to add my 2 cents to the conversation of African Americans and Africans in regards to culture. Now, all of this is in the context of the United States of America, like in terms of identity and defining people and things of that nature. And so if you are from the United States or you watch videos pertaining to African Americans versus Africans, vice versa, or in regards to people talking about the diaspora, the African diaspora, and dealing with descendants of chattel slavery, then you'll know where I'm pretty much coming from in terms of identity. And so let me just read what I wrote, and I had to write it down just so I could try to clarify what I'm trying to get across, whatever that may be in regards to identity. And so let me start. American is a nationality. African American is an ethnicity. So does that make African American a tribe? Let's look at the term Africans. If you are classified as an African, and that's within the United States of America, that is supposed to mean you are most likely from the continent of Africa, or your ancestors came to the Americas more recently based on voluntary immigration. African Americans are constantly compared to people that occupy a whole continent that has 54 countries and ethnicities or tribes. We know that those tribes are different. Why can't we accept that African American tribe is different? Of course, African Americans are different from the Mosi, Wolof, Yoruba, Igbo, Ewe, Fulani, Oromo, Dinka, Maasai, Zulu, etc. The list goes on. Did you know Indians want to be recognized as a tribe in Uganda? I'm talking about Indians from India. They live and work and do business in Uganda. They want to have the right of belonging. Indians aren't demanded to show any relation to African culture, and they're appreciated for who they are in terms of what their culture and identity is known to be in relation to Indian heritage. However, African Americans must express something in their culture to be African besides skin color in order to be accepted, but they are not. African Americans have been traveling to Africa with a gradual increase over the years. They not only travel to connect with their ancestral roots, but they also travel for enjoyment, to simply enjoy a break from their everyday life, contrary to belief. All African Americans do not have the desire to search for ancestral roots in Africa, because some of them continue to make sense of what they have in the United States of America and acknowledge what their immediate ancestors went through. In 2017, the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, recognized Kenyans of Asian heritage, aka Indians, as a tribe in Kenya. I just wanted to bring the fact up that India is a country. India has different states. However, Indians collectively are recognized as a whole tribe despite their subdivisions. USA, the United States of America, is a country and has many states. African Americans are spread out throughout the United States, and they have different cultures. However, African Americans aren't recognized as a tribe. African Americans are considered by many to be a lost people without culture and without roots. The truth is, everyone has culture. If you say someone doesn't have a culture, that just means you have a severe lack of understanding of what culture actually is. Culture is a set of ideas, behaviors, attitudes, and traditions that exist within larger groups of people. The ideas, behaviors, traditions, etc. are passed on from generation to the next generation and are typically resistant to change over time. There are levels when it comes to culture. You can be born and raised in the same country as someone but share very different cultures. and ways of life. You can be someone who can speak the same language, who might come from a tribe, but your tribe could have been divided and separated and split, and then you become something else. You might cook the same type of food, but use slightly different ingredients. People in the north are different from people in the south, no matter where you go, east to west. I think when it comes to people talking about African American culture, there is a comparison of what culture means to them. They think because they have dishes of food, speak another language, and know their tribe and allegedly respect their elders, they define what culture and belief is, comparing it to African Americans, which many people consider are less than because they don't share their standard of what they think culture is supposed to be. African Americans constantly have to be minimized to the you guys are Africans. You guys are lost Africans. They're not recognized as having their own of anything. So if that is the case, if African Americans don't have anything and are nothing like the rest, then why is it a problem when they say they are not African? And so I just wanted to bring that up because the term of being African, in most cases, people don't tend to put that first as their identity, what we know of to be as an African. So if you were inside of Africa and someone asked you, like, where are you from? What are you? You know, most likely they would say, if they're in a different country, they might say their country of origin, like they're in terms of nationality. But see, identity is different because when you're traveling to a different country, then you're going to highlight your nationality more than anything versus identifying like what your tribe is, which people might not even be familiar with tribes, the names of tribes in your country anyway. So they can more so know like, oh, hey, this person, what country they're from, and, you know, identify you in relation to that. But if you are in your country of your native origin, for example, if you were born in Kenya, then, you know, Kenyans might identify each other based on their different tribes and say, which tribe are you from? Are you from Kikuyu tribe? Are you from Luo tribe? You know, so their identity might start at not the national level, but in terms of the ethnic level in the case of tribes. So now if a Kenyan were to travel outside of the country and let's say travel to somewhere like Nigeria, then people might look at them and say, oh, hey, where are you from? And then the person will say Kenya. They're not going to say like, you know, or if someone say, what are you? They might say Kenyan. They're not going to say, I'm Luo, you know. So they're going to identify with their nationality first. And then let's say that Kenyan person traveled to the United States of America. And, you know, when you travel there, the identity, how people identify each other is much different than how you would identify yourself in your country. So I think that's what a lot of times people are missing out on, is how people identify and how people even understand the words and, you know, the background to what they're actually talking about. And the truth is that, you know, although people have been traveling and immigrating to the United States and then also to different countries in Africa, there is a discrepancy when it comes to certain comparisons. You know, it's basically like you're really comparing apples to oranges, because you're comparing African Americans, which are a smaller population of people, compared to a whole continent of people that consists of so many different things, culturally, languages, you know, music, like everything, right? So now, if you dissect all those different things and you dissect things with African Americans, like everybody has their own thing. How is that so hard to understand? You are not going to, look at, hey, okay, this person from Ghana is different from this person from Nigeria. They, when they come together, they know right away, okay, yes, we are different, and yeah, some people, if they travel abroad, let's say the Ghanaians and the Nigerians travel abroad, then they're going to try to come together to do something collective. Especially if they're immigrating to Western countries, then they'll try to come together and have a common understanding and learn some similarities in their culture to come together to make it work for whatever reasons. But what is this whole it's like a whole ganging up on this small group of people, African Americans, and then you're comparing them to a whole continent of people. But people leave out that, hey, African Americans aren't the only people in the diaspora. There are people who have African ancestry that live in the Caribbean, but you rarely see people bring those things up. And the people in the Caribbean go through identity issues also. It's just that a lot of people fail to hear about it. And I think that African Americans tend to be talked about the most because of the culture that they have is very mainstream in terms of the world exploiting it, and it not being, how do I say this, like African American culture is like definitely exploited and just easily spread across the world. But and so people look at it as whatever it looks like mainstream, that's all it is to their culture. But it's not. African American culture is not a monolith. Like what you see on TV, that's just like with overall American culture, people characterize it to be a certain way, and so they do the same thing with breaking it down into ethnic wise. African American culture is a certain way, and so those are ideas and stuff that people have stuck in their head that this is what it is, and then they say, well, that's nothing. Okay, so you have to look at how you're, like, the things that you have been exposed to. Like, have you been around different African Americans from different backgrounds, different classes? They share different values, they have different homes, they African American and on the West Coast is going to do things totally different from someone on the East Coast. They're going to sound different, they're going to look different, they're going to act different. They are different. Okay, so the same thing if you were in Nigeria, and I would not expect someone from the north to be the same as someone from the south. Like, come on. But somehow when it comes to African Americans, then people can't understand that, and they think that they're all just like a monolithic type of people, like everything about them is just homogeneous. And so I'm glad when we can have dialogue like this that will go beyond something that's argumentative, and understanding first, like, how we view identity. What does identity mean to us? How we see ourselves in the world is different from how others see us, but it starts with us understanding, like, how we identify ourselves firstly, and then when we go to other places, do we still stick with how we identify? And then if that's the case, how do others see us, right? Anyway, just, if you've gotten this far, I appreciate you for listening. Comment down below, let me know what your thoughts are and your experiences. Anyway, have a great day.